All right, so today we're folding a brand new pattern, and it's so new that I can't show you what it's going to look like because I haven't folded it before. So we are using a 32 fold diagonal grid. So that's with grid lines perpendicular to the edge. If you're not familiar with diagonal grids, you can find another of my tutorials that'll show you exactly how to fold it. And the diagonal grid is a special case of rotated grid where it actually doesn't matter which side of the paper you start from. If you, like me, want a certain side to be front, then flip to the back side. I know it looks identical, it's the same color. And we're going to identify the center of the paper by folding in half on a grid line and then folding this corner down to the bottom corner, also on a grid line, and that gives us the center of the paper right there. And we are going to start with a double open hexagon twist. So that means that our mountain folds are going to run 2 spaces away from the center. And this is going to be a right-handed twist. So I'm drawing the mountains going out to the edge of the paper on the right-hand side, above the center. And our valley folds will be 1 space out from the folded mountains. So we'll have our mountain, and then we'll immediately set up a valley fold so that we can just tap that with a finger to keep it in place while we set up the next pleat. And I'm using the table to hold my previous pleats, working clockwise around, letting the center be very 3D. Oh, I caught a mistake in my drawing. I drew that mountain fold 3 spaces from the center, and it should be 2. I was looking at it and thinking, this doesn't feel balanced. It wasn't. So when we have everything in the right place, then we'll have this kind of spinning star looking pattern where we'll have 2 spaces in, 1 space out on each of these teeth. 2 in, 1 out, 2 in, 1 out, double open, single depth, double open, single depth, double open, single depth. Didn't know you were going to get a lesson about general hexagon twists, did you? Also, hi Erlu, glad you could join us. So once you have this double open hexagon set up, we can go ahead and press to squash. And then flip over to the opposite side. At this point, it doesn't matter what orientation this hexagon is. All 6 sides are equal. We made sure to put it in the center. But from here on out, it's going to matter more what orientation the paper is. So it's going to matter more about the orientation because this hexagon is not a position of 6-fold rotational symmetry in the pattern. We do not do the same thing on all 6 of these pleats. And to clarify, we're putting the same twist. There will be closed rhombus twists on each of these pleats, but they will be at different distances. So what I'm looking for is my first rhombus on this plate is going to make a tube. So 2 grid spacings between these parallel mountain folds. And the reason why I know that spacing more than I know stuff along this plate is because I'm looking at the crease pattern, and that is a feature that I can clearly see. I'm going to open up my paper. I'm going to put in both the mountain that I drew and the valley one space further out. So I've got my tube pleat going up and to the left, and that is going to be the through line of my closed rhombus. So there's my central diamond with triangles on either side of that through line. And there is my rhombus twist, which I can go ahead and squash. I am assuming that if you're attempting this pattern, you have folded closed rhombus twists before. That is a prerequisite for this video. Next up, I'm going to go around over the top counterclockwise, partly because this is a not so friendly pleat overlap. And yeah, we'll get into exactly what's going on. So one of the features I see in the crease pattern is that I need to go 2 spaces out from this corner of the rhombus twist. 1, 2 spaces out. And then I will have a valley fold coming through and going to a closed triangle on the back. So I'm going to open the pleat from the rhombus so this valley fold can come in. The valley is going to go down and hit that existing valley, and we're going to make a triangle wrap. So notice this valley is coming down on the same grid line, hitting the valley down below, making a 3-way intersection of valleys. Now, actually the fold going on this grid line that used to be valley is a mountain, and there's also a 3-way intersection of mountain folds in here, and we get rid of the extension of the mountain fold that we had drawn earlier. So triangle wrap, and that sets us up for the next closed rhombus twist. And you'll notice that this rhombus is a different distance from the hexagon than this one. This one, the fat corner, is 1 space away from the hexagon whole corner. This one, the corner of the rhombus, is right at the hexagon whole corner. And press to squash. So here there are 3 spaces between our parallel plates. I'm going to choose at this point to go ahead and flip over and squash that closed triangle twist. So flipping over, I'll take that triangle that was wrapped, flip the free pleat, and press to squash. And flip back. I'm going to rotate my paper so this area up here is easy to work on. And this time, I'm going to put a closed triangle twist on the front. So it's going to be centered one space out from the skinny corner of the rhombus. And this should be very familiar if you've ever folded Lens Stars or Lens Garden or any of my patterns with related names. And you'll notice here we're back to 2 spaces between parallel mountains. So I'm setting up this closed triangle, and I'm taking the free pleat and laying it down flat so I have a nice surface to squash my rhombus twist. Then I can restore the pleat and squash the closed triangle. So the positions of symmetry in this pattern are 3 of the same around the hexagon, 3 of the same around the triangle on this side, and 3 of the same around the triangle on the back. So we'll see alternating around the hexagon, triangle on the back, and triangle on the front, alternating 2 spaces between these parallel pleats and 3 spaces. Rhombus corners coming right to the corner of the hexagon hole, rhombus corners coming 1 space further out. So then I can continue doing the same steps that we've seen so far. So 2 spaces out from the corner of the rhombus, I will have my valley fold come over, and I will make a triangle wrap and a closed rhombus twist. And this one will have 3 spaces between parallel mountains. This corner is 1 space out from the hexagon hole. Remember, we've got that close, far alternation, so we can double check our spacing on things. Flipping over, I'll squash the triangle that was wrapped. It's always a good habit to squash your twists immediately. And I'll rotate so I can add in the new triangle on this side and rhombus. And this time we have more pleat overlaps because we are getting back around to the beginning. And once the rhombus is squashed, I can go ahead and squash the triangle. So now I'm going to set up the triangle wrap, the rhombus, and the triangle on the other side. So I'll start by opening up these overlaps, finding that 2 spaces to where the valley fold comes through. I'll go ahead and open this overlap, put in the triangle wrap, and get the new rhombus and triangle in place. In this case, for squashing the rhombus, it's actually more convenient, instead of flipping the free pleat from the triangle, because that would stick it under where we want to squash the rhombus, it's more convenient to flip the corner of our first rhombus. That points the triangle away. It is operating on existing creases, so we're not adding any new folds there. And then we can come back and squash that triangle. Yeah, Early mentioned in the chat that their last piece that they figured out on their own is really similar to this, or well, the variant of rhombus trellis, yes, with closed rhombus and triangles, very similar to this pattern. But if I remember correctly, Early's design had six-fold symmetry in the hexagon. And flipping over, we've got our closed triangle twist. And flipping back, one of the things that, so the topic for Tessellation Academy this month is the hex-rom tri-rom tiling. In there we're talking about using the hexagons in six-fold symmetric ways. But when I was making the materials for that topic, I was like, well, why does the hexagon have to be a six-fold position? And then I came up with 4 or 5 different patterns that use these other symmetries, and that's why this pattern even exists. So there's lots of crossover between Tessellation Academy and whatever I choose to teach. Okay, next up, there's a choice to be made whether we start on a direction that's at 2 pleat spacing or a direction with 3 spaces. I'm going to go with the direction with 3 spaces just because it's clearer exactly where our rhombus twist needs to go. And if I don't throw the pen off the table, that is with the valley fold coming directly to the corner of the closed triangle twist. Now, the challenging part of this pattern is going to be making wraps so the double open hexagon can be in place. I'm not entirely convinced that it's possible just with wraps. We might be pulling out another technique, but for this situation, I'm opening up the pleat from the rhombus below, so these pleats are both going into the next hexagon. And unlike the triangle wrap where we go straight until we hit the valley below, we're going to zig and then zag. And this will create 2 three-way intersections of valley folds, and those will be followed in parallel with 2 three-way intersections of mountain folds. So this is the compound wrap. You can also find this structure in the herringbone weave. Oh, got another fold in here. So you can see this incoming pleat actually goes out on the same grid lines. It just switches mountain valley assignment for a grid spacing in the middle. And okay, so this is sending a pleat back through an existing triangle twist, which we're just going to fold through that because the closed triangle has grid lines on the inside that match up with grid lines on the outside. We have not actually added any new folds by folding through the twist. Good morning, Zach. Glad you could join us. We're going to squash. And the reason why this pattern is called Pajarita rising is because this motif, and I'm kind of borrowing that it looks like the Spanish pajarita. So instead of using the crane as the symbol for origami in Spain, they use a different bird that, when standing, looks a lot like this collection of twists. So there we go. And then in this space, let's see, actually, so we have a bit of a choice. We could run the plate through, or we could do another compound wrap, but our next twist needs to be starting at that corner, so I don't think the compound wrap is a good idea. The next twist up here, so we can see that the corners of the rhombi are one space out from the closed triangle hole. We're going to come one space out. Our valley will go this way. And we can set up our rhombus twist. We can even do a compound wrap underneath of it. But this is making a very 3D situation. And here we can do a compound wrap and then overlap up here. But yeah, this is making a very 3D situation. So what I'm going to do is put my fingers under the twist. I'm going to get things as flat as I possibly can while having it lifted up in the air. And then I will press to squash in the air without it being on the table. And then once it's flat, actually I can even wild. I can send that plate through above the rhombus and get that in place. So now the question becomes, can I put in that rhombus and get things to lay flat again? Excellent question. My valley comes out down from the corner of the triangle. I'm going to pop this mountain fold down, put in a triangle wrap, and that triangle wrap is going to combine with the pleat, the through line of the rhombus. So let me get this other pleat headed straight through the triangle twist first. And we're going to end up with a double depth pleat in here. So this does actually have a flat folded state. I was starting to think we would have to do 2 layers on this one. Oh, and you got to make sure that this bottom pleat is still folded. Wild. Okay. Next up, what we saw earlier is that this pleat is just going to continue through. We're not going to try and wrap it. We're not going to do anything fancy. We're going to say, okay, that pleat's going through here and I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to have my valley fold one space out from the closed triangle hole coming down. And then that valley fold, where it hits the next pleat, yes, we will do a compound wrap. And put in the rest of the closed rhombus. So compound wrap, closed rhombus twist, and we will do a compound wrap up above as well. And then we're going to let that pleat that we had sent through from the previous rhombus, we're going to let that fold through on top. Now I'm going to leave it 3D while I squash. So this is a solution to not have to squash in the air. We can squash on the table and then fold that pleat on top. There is more than one way to have half the pleats going into a hexagon twist. Yeah, definitely more than one way. Compound wrap plus triangle wrap works. Compound wrap plus pleat just going through things also works. And that seems to be the less disruptive option. But for this next one, since we have the space, I'm going to go ahead and put in a triangle wrap. Which will feed into a double depth pleat, not because it's a double depth twist, but because the single depth of the pleat from the rhombus twist is adding to the single depth of the pleat from the triangle wrap. And the mountain of one is on the same grid line as the valley of the other, and so they cancel out, leaving a mountain 2 spaces from a valley. Okay. One more rhombus. So this one is the one that you just fold straight through everything. One more rhombus here. And this will be interesting. So I'm going the 1 space out, and it does feel weird to be folding further out than a pleat that's passing through things, but that's just what we're working with because of the double open hexagon. So 1 space out from the closed triangle hole, I'll have my new valley fold, my new compound wrap, and when I set up my closed rhombus twist, that is sending a pleat back into this area that already has wraps in it, what I'm going to do is open that compound wrap so I can put in a compound wrap of this rhombus over the pleat from the new rhombus, which lets me do a triangle wrap back up in and under, which again is causing a double depth pleat out here. So there's an accordion double depth pleat over single depth pleat, and then there's the pleat coming from all the way over here. And we'll just squash this rhombus twist before we close everything up. Okay, so there's quite a lot going on here, and I'm going to first flip over to the back side and then open one of these pleats that was running through everything. I'm going for folding this hexagon twist, the double open hexagon, and then I can open the compound wrap, and here I'm looking for the 2 in, 1 out, 2 in, 1 out, 1, 2 in, 1 out. This is causing a pleat overlap. 2 in, 1 out, 2 in, 1 out, and don't you know, it snuggles right in there. I do have this plate laying over the plate below. I could also choose to lift that out of the way if the layers are bunching up. Then I can press to squash all the way out into those corners. Can lay things down over the top. And now I've got a pleat overlap, and I can follow that overlap for the rest of the ring around the center. Yeah, it's a very involved set of many accordion pleats. So grabbing that overlap, I'll flip over. I notice that this rhombus has a triangle on the back on one side. What you'll see with these rhombus twists is one side of the through line goes to a triangle on the back and the other side goes to a triangle on the front. So this one's heading to a triangle on the front, which is going to be centered one space out from the corner of the rhombus twist. And notice I'm setting up a second triangle. This is because I do not want to rush into folding the next rhombus. I'm going to leave it for the next ring around the center, squash the triangle, lay this three-way intersection that will eventually become a rhombus over the top. And then that pushes me into the next set of parallel pleats. I'm going to start by opening up this mess and putting in a hexagon. So I'll flip over, and that's with the acknowledgement that there will be a probably whole rhombus on this side, but we'll see exactly what we need. So opening up, I had two wraps here. I'm opening them both, popping that point out, looking for the 2 in, 1 out, 2 in, 1 out, 2 in, 1 out. Two in, 1 out, next pleat. And here we have an overlap very close to the hexagon that I'm squashing. And I know that goes to a rhombus on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and open up. And in this situation, I need a compound wrap to resolve that. And then once my hexagon is set up and fully balanced, I can go ahead and squash. Flipping over. Remember, anytime you have a compound wrap, you can go ahead and put a whole rhombus. If that compound wrap is in place of a hexagon, however, you always leave it sit for the next ring around the center. And then we've got our pleat overlap. This one, the rhombus already has a triangle on the front, so we're looking for a triangle on the back. And what do we have around the triangles on the back? We have tube pleat spacing. So I'm going to find tube pleat spacing, put in a triangle wrap, and then leave this future rhombus set up as a three-way intersection. Flipping over, I can squash my new triangle twist. from here, I'm feeding into the next wraps for a double open hexagon, which I can start opening up, looking for the 2 in, 1 out, 2 in, 1 out, 2 in, 1 out. And as we saw on the last hexagon, I can put in a compound wrap as a placeholder for the next rhombus twist. Notice that this time, instead of these two pleats stacking directly on top of each other, they're one space away. And that is fine. That is expected because we don't have the same things on all 6 sides of the hexagon. And flipping over, I can pop that compound wrap and squash. Then I've got a pleat overlap that needs a triangle on this side again. And that 3-way intersection that I'll just kind of pull to the side while I squash the triangle and then lay down over top of the triangle. And now feeding into the next set of parallel pleats. And a little water break. Oh, that's fun. I didn't realize that these would perfectly line up. It's kind of like gems on a lattice. And so flipping over, finding the next notice there that I moved those folds way over to get into place for the double open hexagon. And here I'm kind of prepping, but not fully setting up this pleat so I can know where this one goes. And put in the compound wrap. Because putting in that compound wrap is going to open up whatever's laying on top of it. So I just need to know where the compound wrap goes. And then deal with the rest. Flipping over, I can finish the rhombus twist. And open up this overlap to put in, at tube pleat spacing, a triangle wrap. And a 3-way intersection on top as a placeholder for the next rhombus twist. Then I'll flip over and squash the triangle. And I've noticed that on alternating sets of parallel pleats, there's still an overlap here. So why is that? It's because these are the ones where the pleat is just passing straight through everything and not wrapped. So if it was wrapped, there would not be an overlap there. We can go ahead and open up because the double open hexagon is the next thing we're putting in. I'm paying attention to where this pleat is going to go through and putting in a compound wrap. And I know that is feeding back in the layers I'm working through, but if I didn't, I would have this pleat coming through the center. So sometimes it's a good idea to jump down to something more recognizable, especially if it's finishing a hexagon, and then feed back the overlaps as needed. But then when I pop open the compound wrap and fold that rhombus, there's no more overlaps up here. And then we've got the overlap down here. This time triangle is on this side of the paper. And squash, and another hexagon. So I'm opening this wrap, got the 2 in, 1 out here. I'm going to push this so I've got 2 in here, and push and push and push some more. So 2 in, 1 out, all the way to 2 in, and then 1 out. And I've got the compound wrap up above. And then flip and turn that compound wrap into a rhombus twist. And this time in here, it's going to be a little more complicated. So we can up, down, do our triangle wrap, but I'm not going to fold firmly through here because that would be making an extra crease through the hexagon. Putting in the 3-way intersection. I'm going to instead, and like I can do this from this side, it's also totally fine to lay down that 3-way intersection, flip over, and set up the triangle twist in full. And then flip back, and there's one more rhombus twist. And we didn't do any kind of wrap because that was a friendly overlap to open on this side, just because we folded this hexagon before we folded the triangle. If it was the other way around, I would have wrapped it. Okay, getting closer. I think with the 32 divisions, we're going to fit most of the next ring around. And I'm going to go ahead and say that we're going to go ahead and squash any partial hexagons. And we've been working around this way, but I have a suspicion now that I see these layers that starting up here is going to lead to less pleats headed through the middle of things. Could be wrong, but I have a suspicion. And so I'll start with this rhombus that had been left as a three-way intersection. It's going to send a pleat up through here. I'm leaving that as an overlap while I squash the rhombus. And then, like I said, we are going ahead and squashing the partial hexagons here. So I'm going to flip. Actually, before I flip, coming out of this side of the rhombus, we can see and actually we can see directly in the same orientation, that's going to be tube pleat spacing. So we can go ahead and say that's another pleat of this hexagon I'm about to squash. So now when I flip over, I can say 2 in, 1 out, 2 in, 1 out. I've got 2 corners of that hexagon. I can go ahead and squash the whole thing. Then flipping back, actually, sorry, while I'm on the hexagon side, this needs a triangle on this side of the paper. And we saw earlier that setting up the triangle wrap, that leads to overlaps with the hexagon nearby. So I'm going to go ahead and do it here. Looking down at this copy of this situation, I've got this rhombus slit. The pleat goes up 1 space and then another into the center. So up 1 space, another space hits the center. I can also draw the valley across here. That's coming together at a 120-degree angle. So these pleats. And that means I'm going to do a triangle wrap to accommodate that plate and a triangle twist. Flipping back, I'm going ahead and finishing out to the edge. And also, I have this pleat overlap anyway, so I do need to finish this rhombus. The rhombus already has a triangle on the back on one side, so on the other side, it needs a triangle on the front. And then you can pop that triangle out. I'm not going to bother with any teeny tiny rhombus whole corner. So this will be what the edge looks like through here. And then continuing onwards, I've got my next set of parallel pleats. So if I was doing more, I would actually start with a 3-way intersection off of this triangle and then feed down and down and down. I don't have much grid to work with, so I'm going to come down. This one is feeding into a hexagon on the back. That's going to come in conflict with this. This one will feed into the same hexagon if I go ahead and fold the rhombus twist. And conveniently, this passes just under these pleats. I'm going to leave it as an overlap. If I had more grid, if I had more stuff out here, I would wrap. And flipping over, I can open the pleat overlap, find my partial hexagon, again, 2 over, 1 down, or 2 in, 1 out, however you like to think about it, for that double open hexagon. And squash. Notice here, this is not tube pleat spacing, and it shouldn't be, because this is feeding into a triangle on the front and another rhombus, which is feeding into a triangle wrap. So just like when we got all the way around the very center hexagon, I'm going to pop this corner over so the triangle can lay down flat. Yeah, earlier was mentioning that this pattern must be particularly beautiful with very translucent paper, where you can see clearly the differences in brightness depending on the number of layers. I bet this would be a gorgeous pattern. And definitely a candidate for inclusion in future rounds of Advent of Tess, although the weird symmetry stuff might take away from that. But definitely, actually I forget if I put it in, no, I wouldn't have put it in Tessellation Academy because I'm already done folding and photographing all of those. But here it is. So here I have an overlap between the triangle and the pleat from the hexagon. On this grid, it's not much of an overlap, but we can still go ahead and squash. Whoop. It's a little bit tucked in there. Squash that rhombus and continue on out. And I'm noticing here that actually I had the same overlap over here that I ignored. I can go ahead and squash a very partial rhombus there in the corner. Okay, continuing onwards, I left a triangle wrap behind, so I will flip over and squash the triangle. Flipping back, I'll finish this rhombus twist, and this is sending a pleat through. I could do a compound wrap to avoid running through the triangle, or I could just run it over. Either way. And then flipping over, I can set up, and this time I do have the tube pleat spacing, the partial hexagon on the back, and flipping I have, oh sorry, instead of flipping, triangle and triangle wrap, because having this folded back folds through. If we had a bigger grid, it would fold through the hexagon. So we want to do this triangle first, and then come over and do the rhombus and next triangle. And we can include our partial rhombus near the corner, just for completeness. And rinse and repeat. So I've got this rhombus twist. It's feeding back into everything. That opens into a partial hexagon. And flip, and I need a triangle on this side because the other side of the rhombus has a triangle on the opposite side. And I can go ahead and set up that next whole rhombus with a triangle wrap further along. Lay down the triangle while I squash the rhombus. I can come back to this overlap and fold the rhombus twist. Flip over, fold the triangle that was wrapped. It's kind of an epic name, the triangle who was wrapped. Reminds me of like the lamb who was slain. And squash and flip and partial hexagon. Again, these are all exactly the same as steps that I have shown in more detail just a few minutes ago. Flip over and, oh, nope, not flip over. Triangle on the back, leading to triangle wrap. Feeding into rhombus and new triangle. Yeah, so one of the reasons I picked this pattern for the live stream is to introduce this idea that the symmetry of the tiling does not have to be the symmetry of the crease pattern of the origami tessellation. But also, because I thought this would be a cool pattern and I wanted a reason to fold it sooner rather than later. So I gave myself a reason. And this has turned out even cooler than I expected. So now I'm probably going to want to fold a full version of it, but it might take me a year to get around to that. And triangle on this side, rhombus and triangle wrap. Nice. So since I'm folding this pattern for the very first time right now, it did not make it into the last update of Tessellation Garden, but there are 69 new patterns inside of Tessellation Garden, including 2 other patterns that use not 6-fold symmetries in this tiling that are also pretty cool. One of them is a flagstone pattern and uses hybrid hexagon twists. The other uses all standard twists, open hexagon, closed triangle, and rhombus, but in a different way than this. And yeah, those are some really great patterns that I encourage you to check out. They're all in Tessellation Garden, and you can identify them because everything is sorted by tiling. and inside of the tiling it's sorted by the symmetry application. So you can quickly find those in the hex-rom, tri-rom tiling with the maximum twofold or the twofold symmetries and the threefold symmetries subcategories. So this is Pajarita Rising. Oh, I should say, if you want to get Tessellation Garden, if you don't have it already, which I know some of you do have it already, that is at training.gatheringfolds.com/garden. Yeah, earlier just joined Tessellation Garden and 69 new patterns, and there were already over 600 in there, all of them my designs. So you know it's going to be a good time. So we've got these pajarita shapes on this lattice network with these double open hexagon holes. I think this is a super cool pattern. The only thing left is backlighting. So here we have it. Fortunately, my phone does not compete well with sunlight and the bright light shining above, but this is indeed a cool pattern in backlighting too. On the other side. So, happy folding, everyone. And I hope you have a great day, have a great week, and go ahead and try it for yourself. Happy folding, and see you next week when I'm folding a giant pattern that was a real surprise about what symmetries are possible to use with only open hexagon and closed triangle twists in the hexagons and triangles six-fold tiling. So happy folding, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.